Hello everybody, this is Steve Yoder. Welcome to this short video on guidance for your individual memoranda that you'll be preparing this semester here in the CEO strategy class. This guidance, by the way, would be equally applicable to your team presentations. Let's go ahead and get started. Our goals in this short video are to help you avoid what I have found to be the most common mistakes that students make in preparing these videos, and I think that you'll find that the guidance here will be very helpful to you in your professional careers. Here's the checklist. We're going to break this down, as you know from our discussions about good PowerPoint slides. This is probably too many words for a slide, but this is an example of a slide that is designed to be printed out and taken with you. I'm a big believer in checklists. Checklists come about not and are useful not when we make errors of ignorance, that is, we just don't know what the heck we're doing, but when we make careless errors. We know what we're doing, but we, because we're human, have forgotten certain things. The medical industry has made great use of checklists. There's a wonderful book called The Checklist Manifesto that describes how hospitals, particularly surgery units in hospitals, make great use of checklists because no matter how smart you are, you can't remember every step. And if you simply have the checklist on hand and go through the steps, you're not going to make an error of ineptitude. You know the material, but as I said, you're human and you might forget it. And that's what this checklist is about. I hope that perhaps you will keep this in a safe place, print it out, and use it at least in this class. But let's get started and look at these 7 things on this checklist. The first item on the checklist is to make sure that you have a topic sentence at the beginning of every paragraph. I know this sounds like 11th grade in high school, but it is so important. It's not just a matter of form. It actually shows the reader that you know how to synthesize ideas, that you know how to gather up the thoughts from everything that's going to be expressed in a particular paragraph or section of a paper and summarize it at the very beginning. That's what the reader wants. The reader wants to look at a sentence at the beginning and know what is coming. So, do's and don'ts. I'll always start with the don'ts on these 7 items on this checklist. Here's an actual example. I think this is very difficult to read and doesn't really synthesize in a nice storytelling way what is to follow in this particular paragraph. Stop and pause and look at that, and I think you'll agree that this is just too hard to read. You have to study it too hard. It's just not conversational. This is much better. It, in layman's terms, says that net income for this organization has been going up with the exception of one particular quarter, and the reason why that one quarter was not good. So, check. We will be striving for topic sentences that show you can synthesize ideas. Let's keep going. I find that many students often never tell me what exactly it is that the organization does. I don't know whether subconsciously this means that students think I already know and don't have to be told, but I'm telling you here, and I really mean it, that these memoranda should be written to demonstrate that you actually know what the organization does. Look at this. ProAssurance is a holding company of a casualty insurance companies and property. I don't even know that that's a sentence, to tell you the truth, and it has a bunch of words, as we're going to talk about later, that are not defined. Think of it this way. If you were sitting down for dinner with your grandmother, would she understand in one sentence what the company did if you were to use a sentence like this? This is much better. Stop and pause and look at this. It says in very plain language exactly what this particular company does. So, check. You have explained in clear terms what the company does. Let's keep going. I find that many students confuse an internal weakness with an external threat. They are not the same thing. Remember, we talked about SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. In strategic planning language, a weakness is internal and a threat is external. And if you were to write a sentence like you see here, it would show me that you have not grasped that very important concept, and you'll get marked down on your individual memorandum if you were to make a mistake like this. It's not a weakness to be operating in a low or a high interest rate environment. That is an external threat. Better, here you can see that these two examples show that the student understands what a weakness is, i.e. internal, versus what a threat is, i.e. external. So check. You have not made the mistake of confusing a weakness and a threat. I also find that students will occasionally confuse results of operations with internal core strengths. Here's an example. One of the company's strengths has been its strong financial performance over the past few years. That doesn't tell me anything about what the company's core competencies are that have led to those results. Results are not strengths, they are results of strengths, if you follow me there. So don't make this mistake. Stop, pause, make sure that you realize you understand what I'm saying here. Here would be better illustrations of showing me that you understand what a strength is. So, check. You're not going to confuse results and strengths. Let's keep going. I find that students often will use undefined terms. Perhaps again assuming that I know what those terms mean because I'm the instructor. Don't do that. I want to know that you understand what the terms mean, that you have read about the company sufficiently to understand the acronyms that are being used. For example, Medical Properties Trust is a REIT. Well, what the heck is a REIT? This would be better, defining what a REIT is. Don't use terms that are not readily known. If they require definition, I expect you to give me the definition. So check. You're not going to use undefined terms. Let's keep going. Many times a company will describe for the outside world in very clear, transparent terms what its strategy actually is. If the company has gone to the trouble of doing that, and it's really not that much trouble, you should be using it. You don't need to be guessing it, and you know how to search for the word strategy electronically in a document. The word strategy will appear in all of these places. Take a look at this list. Just in the 10K alone, for example, for a publicly traded company, if you search for the word strategy, it's going to come up. If you ignore that, I'm going to assume that you were too lazy to do that simple type of an electronic search. The company's investor presentation, if it's a public company, will often be a gold mine for insights into strategy. So, check. If the company has described publicly what its strategy is, you have repeated it. Finally, I expect you to tell me if the strategy is working for a particular company. Look at this actual example. Something about loyalty. Does that really tell me anything about whether or not the company's strategy is working? Have they been financially successful? This, may well be nice words that the company might use somewhere to convey a kind of softer side of the company, that they have good company loyalty. But better would be something like you see here, that shows that you have actually looked for what a company has described as its strategy and have actually thought through whether that strategy seems to be working, as evidenced usually by financial results. So that is it. Please do not make the mistakes that are summarized here in this 7-point checklist. I strongly urge you to print this out and to keep it handy when you are preparing your individual memoranda and your team memoranda this semester.